Today we're going to make mashed potatoes, and obviously I'm going to be making a lot more than you are. You're probably going to have like 2 or 3 potatoes. This is probably about the amount that you want when you make a portion for your practical, but the process is still the same. And so I have potatoes, I have butter, and I have heavy cream. And you're like, why aren't you using milk? Well, in restaurants we use heavy cream because it tastes better, the mouthfeel is better, it's just better. Now, if you eat mashed potatoes a lot at home, you should not be using heavy cream because it's not healthy for you. But when you go out to eat, it should be an experience. So I have my pot. So the first thing we need to do is get these peeled. Okay, so all of my potatoes are peeled. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them. Everybody has pet peeves, and I'm about to let you in on one of my pet peeves. Now, when people cut potatoes, the first thing that they do is just grab the potato and they just cut it in half. And then they're like, oh, how should I cut this? What you need to do is you need to think about what size you want it first and then cut the potato. So if I was to cut this one in half, I would be cutting it wrong, because what you want to do is somewhere around a medium to large dice. So this one, I'm actually going to cut in thirds, into planks, and then cut it down in thirds this way, and then cut it this way. And now I have a perfect large dice for my mashed potatoes. If I was to just cut it in half, like they would have been oblong going one way and perfect the other way. And so it's always funny to me when I judge your knife cuts and I see that, because see, that's perfect. How some people just automatically cut it in half and then think about it afterwards. So try and think about it before. Now this one you can cut in half, and that is a beautiful thing. And then you can just cut it down. Try and keep it on the flat side, it's easier. And then it's just about the same size as the other ones. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut all these potatoes, put them in here, and then I'm gonna cut my butter, and I'm going to, just so it gets up to room temperature, so when I mix it into the mashed potatoes, it'll mix in nicer. When I worked in restaurants, we actually heated up butter and heavy cream so the mashed potatoes wouldn't get cold. And then I have 2 cloves of garlic, and this is the magic. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to peel these and then put them in here. And what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to be like, that's garlic. What's going to happen is you're going to be like, there's this wonderful rich flavor that you can't quite put your finger on. That's the garlic. It's this lovely background flavor. So what I'm going to do is just add this a little, and then throw that inside. And then I'm going to do that with the other one, and then finish cutting my potatoes, and then I'll see you back here in a minute. Potatoes are cut and in water, and the water is just room temperature water. It is not hot water. I know that some people like to boil water and then put the potatoes in. Well, the problem with that is you're going to get burned. You're going to put them in. It's going to, they're going to do belly flaps, and it's going to splash all that water back on you, and you're going to get burned. So here's a good rule when it comes to cooking vegetables in water or stock. If it is a root vegetable like potatoes or rutabagas or, I don't know, sweet potatoes, you cut them, you put water on them, and then you bring them to a boil. If it is a green vegetable, then that's not a root vegetable. So a green vegetable, not a root vegetable, you boil the water, then put it in. And that is a good way to cook it, so it cooks properly, and also you don't get burned. So 2 good rules. Okay, so I am going to take a big hefty bunch of salt to make sure our potatoes are nice and seasoned. I'm going to put a lid on this, and then all I'm going to do is bring it to a simmer. And now once it comes to a simmer, with this size potato, once I see those first bubbles start to break, I'm going to set a 5-minute timer. And what's going to happen is between 5 and 7 minutes, I guarantee, well, maybe not guarantee, but they'll be done in about that time frame. Okay, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, if you notice, bubbles are starting to break. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now set a 5-minute timer, and then we'll see how close they are to done. I'm sorry that in the background you hear my chicken cooking, but you know, gotta have dinner. It has been 5 minutes, and so what we're going to do now is check our potatoes. And when you check vegetables, they say that they should be fork tender. Well, what they mean by that is you literally grab a fork, you find the biggest one, because the biggest one is the last one to cook. And so that one. And then all that I'm going to do, if you can kind of see what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to stab it if I can. It's hard to do this on camera. And see how it just broke apart? But I don't know if you can see this, but it's also a little white in the center still. That's not done. And if you're unsure, just take a piece and try it. Yeah, not done. Going to give another 2 minutes. See you in 2 minutes. It has been another 2 minutes, so it's time to dig in and find another one to try. We'll try this one right here, see if this one stays still for us. And then yeah, that's really nice. And yet again, you can try it if you're unsure, but you see how it like breaks up really easily? And you really don't want to overcook your potatoes, because when potatoes cook, they, what happens is water goes into the potato, starch comes out of the potato, and that's a cooked potato. So basically, when you overcook a potato, you're just adding more water, water, water. And what we want is we want that starch to stay in there so it can hold on to all of the butter and the cream and everything else that we're trying to put in there. What I forgot to say is I'm going to now drain this. As you can see, our potatoes are still nice and steamy. I put them back in the pot. And the reason that you put them back in the pot is because the pot is still hot. And so it will take all that extra moisture that's in there and make it steam away. And that is a good thing, because I mean, the last thing you want to add to almost any dish is water, because water doesn't taste like anything. So first thing we do before we add anything else, our butter, did not expect that to happen. Our heavy cream, we are going to be mashing up our potatoes. And I'm going like old school home with this. You can use a potato masher, you can use a ricer, you can use a food mill, or you can use this. That is the best way to do it. I actually prefer a ricer or a food mill, and we have a food mill at school. And if you want super silky potatoes, that is what you're going to do. But before we add anything, we're going to mash these up. And because if we added our butter or our cream, what would happen is it would make it slick and the potatoes could like get away. But this way, we're going to actually get a smoother potato. So I mashed up the potatoes, and I tried the potatoes, and they need salt. So I'm going to add some salt. And I know it looks like I'm adding a ton of salt, but they're going to be fine. So the next thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add butter. And so I'm probably going to be adding like 3/4 of this stick. Let me add a little bit more. And then all that we're going to do is mix this in. See you in a minute. So the butter is all incorporated. And so I tried the potatoes, and they taste really good. They taste like buttery potatoes, which is what they should taste like. Now, the cream or the milk or whatever dairy you add at this point is to adjust consistency. And so that's going to give it a nice creamy texture, but it's also determining what texture you want. So I'm just going to add a little bit to start. Now, I would suggest before you turn on your mixer that you just stir this in a little bit. And the reason you want to stir this in a little bit is because you don't want to be wearing it. So it's a really nice consistency at this point. I added a little bit more heavy cream, but you can see that like they're thick enough that they will stand up on their own, and they have a really good flavor. So this is really nice mashed potatoes. And you could add parsley to this or whatever. Parsley will turn olive green really quickly, so you would want to do that and then serve it. I'm going to get a pastry bag, and then we're going to put in a pastry bag and hold it until we need it. You could, but if it's like this, you could just put it in the warmer or put it in a warm place, and it will stay warm until you need it. And it will still be pretty good, which is really nice about starches. They hold really, really well. So what we're going to do now is we are going to put our mashed potatoes in a piping bag. I have a star tip, and so it's just going to make our mashed potatoes look nicer on the plate rather than just scooping them on. So you always want to use the star tip when you pipe mashed potatoes, and that's because I've seen students use a round tip before, and it just looks like a poop emoji. So the first thing that you do is whenever you fill any kind of piping bag is you turn it over more than halfway. And I like to make my hand look like a C. So you're almost kind of doing like, so it's more than halfway, and you're kind of making like a sock puppet out of it. I want mashed potatoes. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna feed the puppet. So you're just gonna take a rubber spatula, take your lovely mashed potatoes that you spend so much time making, and just squeeze them on in. And the nice thing about making your hand like a C is it kind of gives your rubber spatula a place to kind of like squeegee off the excess mashed potatoes. So don't know how much I actually need in here. And then what I'm gonna do is to keep these warm, because I mean, now that they're in the bag, you don't want them to get cold. I like to spin it like this, is actually I have an Instapot, and this Instapot is set to warm. And so all I'm gonna do is take my bag and sit it in here. Now, normally what I would do is there's two places in restaurants that I like to put my mashed potatoes in a bag to keep warm. One is on the steam table between the bays on that little piece of metal that is like a perfect place. Or if you have a warmer nearby, you just stick it on a sheet pan in the warmer and it keeps them warm. You do want to make sure the back though is spun because you don't want them to dry out. So now it's time to plate. So now it is time to plate. And when you're thinking about what goes on the plate first, I want you to think about the order that you made it, because what happens is it's almost exactly the same order. And so we have our mashed potatoes, and I'm gonna show you 3 different ways to pipe mashed potatoes. The first is the easiest. So you're gonna start like, if this was the middle point, right farther back from the middle, and you're just gonna go around kind of like an ice cream cone and create some height on your plate. So this is 1. And that's right in the center. Now is the standard 10, 2, 6. So you would do the same thing at 10 o'clock. And then lastly would be the, I don't really have a name for it, but basically all that you're gonna do is start on one side of the plate. Like, so if that's the center, you're gonna start just slightly back, and you're just gonna kind of swirl, and there you go. So now you have something nice that you can lay your chicken on to give it some height, and then you can also, it also looks really fancy.